Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Fair Territory Winter Meetings Edition from my palatial suite at the Opryland Hotel in Nashville. We are taping this show at 6 o'clock Eastern on Sunday night. So everything I am about to say could change conceivably, but I'm not anticipating anything major happening tonight. Famous last words. That's when everything always happens, when you have that presumption. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things on the show today. We're going to start with 5 major stories that we'll be tracking at the winter meetings. The 5 biggest things going on, at least in my opinion. People can agree or disagree. Obviously, numero uno is Shohei Ohtani. And the question not only is when is he going to sign, but of course, where is he going to sign and for how much? The teams that seem to be at the forefront of this are the Dodgers, Blue Jays, and Cubs. But as I've said many times on this show, and I'll say it again, with free agency, you never entirely know what's going on. There's always things going on behind the scenes. I'm not saying there's a mystery team, though there might be. I'm not saying anything crazy is going on. But at the same time, you just don't know. And the whole thing with Ohtani from the beginning has been a lack of awareness about his true desires. We hear he wants to win. Okay, if he wants to win, he's not going to the Blue Jays necessarily. He's not going to the Cubs necessarily. He's going to the Dodgers. We hear he has no geographic preference. We'll see. I'm sure he has some feelings about the city he wants to play in. All of these things remain unknown. Do I expect the contract is going to be massive? Yes, over $500 million. Do I expect opt-outs? Yes. Ultimately, where this ends up, well, we're going to find out in short order. And the one thing that has kind of been in my mind lately is this idea that Ohtani knows most likely where he wants to go. And he's directing his agent, Nez Bolello of CAA, accordingly. And then Nez Bolello does the work. Now, the agent's job is to get as much money as possible in the place where Ohtani wants to go. If Ohtani wants, just as an example, the Dodgers, well, they're going to go as far as they can with the other teams, and then he'll go to the Dodgers. So that's Shohei Ohtani. Not a lot of information there, I know, and people on Twitter saying, tweet something. No, we're not going to tweet anything until we know something. Number 2 on this list, well, Juan Soto. Of course, he has been the subject of trade talk with the Yankees, with the Blue Jays as well. The Padres almost definitely have to move him. I've written about this. We've talked about this for weeks. It seems inevitable at this point. And the question, of course, is what can you get for a player who is going to earn $30 million plus in arbitration next year, his final year of arbitration, before becoming a free agent? It's a difficult trade to pull off and get good value back. The team that is getting Soto is getting that salary. They're taking on that salary, and they're getting no assurance that they can keep him because Soto, of course, is represented by Scott Boras. Soto turned down $440 million from the Nationals summer of 22. That's what led to his trade to the Padres. Soto is not going to sign an extension with the team that acquires him. So I do expect him to be moved. Don't know if it will happen here. All of these things, Ohtani, Soto, we'll get to Yamamoto shortly, they're all sort of linked together because some of the same teams are overlapping in their pursuits of these players. Once Ohtani goes, then a lot will happen, but there's no timeline on that. There's no deadline on that. Third on my list, just mentioned him, Yoshinobu Yamamoto. This guy is the belle of the ball outside of Ohtani. Why? We've talked about this. He's 25 years old. He is a 3-time winner of the Japanese Sawamura Award, which is their version of the Cy Young. He is a 3-time MVP. He is a little short, I know that, short in stature, but teams don't seem too fazed by it. They're going crazy for him. I wrote this week, the initial expectation was $200 million. It sounds now like it might be a lot higher, and then you add the posting fee onto that. So Yamamoto is a guy that we've heard linked to the Giants, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, the Red Sox. Virtually every team wants him because of his relative youth. Yamamoto, I don't know that it will happen here. In fact, it seems that it will take longer. It's not going to take the entire 45 days of the posting process. That should go smoother than that and quicker than that. But whether it happens at the winter meetings, that probably is a long shot. All right, next on my list, top 5 storylines. Yes, I'm going to throw it out there. The Yankees. The Yankees, to me, are in an unenviable position here. Brian Cashman, their general manager, you might say it's of his own making. You can certainly make that case. They've got a lot to do, and they're not necessarily going to win in every pursuit that they go embark upon here. Soto, we've seen that the Padres are asking for a lot, at least according to reports, and the Yankees aren't willing to necessarily meet the price for, again, a one-year guy. Yamamoto, fierce competition for him. Could the Yankees get involved for other players? Cody Bellinger, the free agent, of course, would be one. Sure, they could, but they're not necessarily going to win all of these pursuits. They need a center fielder, they need a left fielder, they need starting pitching, probably some bullpen help too. I don't know if they're going to be able to get all of this done, and the pressure on them is extreme, at least from their fan base. Their fans are frustrated, as are a number of fans in different cities: St. Louis, Toronto, San Francisco. It's kind of common right now around baseball, and it's putting some of these organizations on tilt. The Yankees don't necessarily operate on tilt. They certainly haven't under Hal Steinbrenner, but they've got to do some things, and it's not going to be easy to accomplish all that they need to do. Finally, the one other thing I want to discuss here in the first segment: trades of starting pitchers. Now, you've heard all of the names by this point. Dylan Cease, 2 years of control with him. Corbin Burns, 1 year of control. Tyler Glasnow, 1 year of control. Again, will these happen here? I don't know. It all, again, is tied together, but these are three pitchers that will make a difference for the teams that they join, no question about it. Cease, runner-up in the Cy Young a couple of years ago. Burns is a Cy Young winner. Shane Bieber, another Cy Young winner. These guys all are rather accomplished, and Tyler Glasnow doesn't necessarily have the track record of some of the others, but he is a very talented guy. The Rays need to cut payroll. They're going to be active. So those are all of the storylines that I've got in my head right now, some of the things I'm trying to follow along with you guys. We'll just have to see how it all plays out. Time now for the Inside Dish. This is the part of the show where I go inside a story I've written, inside something I've done in the past, inside a trend going on in the game. This week's topic is obvious: favorite winter meeting stories. Now, I've been coming to the winter meetings since, I believe, 1987 was my first. And I remember chasing an agent named Jim Turner in the halls of whatever hotel it was that year, and the Orioles were trying to sign Franklin Stubbs. He was their big pursuit that year. And Jim Turner said to me, there's a market forming, and they're going to have to react. That was my introduction to the winter meetings. Now, I've got a lot of stories over the years, one of which, the best of which, I am not going to tell today. Because if I ever write a book, and I might not get time to do that until I'm like 90 years old, by which point I probably would have forgotten everything. But if I ever do write a book, this story will be chapter 1 because it is that good. I can tell you that it involves the Albert Pujols signing by the Angels, but that's all I'm going to say. There's a lot more there to uncover in later times. Now, the three stories I'm going to tell revolve around three winter meetings that aren't necessarily recent. In fact, none of them took place within the last 10 years. Let's start with the 2000 winter meetings. In Dallas, the Loews Anatole Hotel, one of the great spending orgies of all time in Major League Baseball. That was the year Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, Mike Hampton, Darren Dreifert, and a number of others signed. The money was flying. And let's look at some of the deals. Even today, they are impressive numbers, though, of course, they've been dwarfed. It's only almost a quarter century later. A-Rod went for 10 years, $252 million. Manny Ramirez, 8 years, $160 million. Mike Hampton, at the moment he signed that, at the start of the winter meetings, this was the biggest deal. 8 years, $121 million. Biggest deal in baseball history, I believe, at that point. Didn't last long. And then Darren Dreifert, 5 years, $55 million. What I remember about the A-Rod deal was, of course, we were all shocked by the number, but not long before it came out and we reported it, I had seen Frank Wren, who was then an assistant GM with the Braves. And if I'm not mistaken, the Braves were involved in the bidding. And Wren was walking into an elevator, and he turned around to me, and he said, 10 times 24. That would have been 10 years, $240 million. I could not believe the number, and of course, the number was even higher. The other thing I remember about that winter meetings, the Manny Ramirez pursuit by both the Indians at the time, is what they were called, and the Red Sox. The Indians were in this thing until the end. And I remember calling John Hart, their general manager at the time, and this was right before or right as this was coming to a head. And I said, John, I hear you're on Manny. I hear you still have a chance. Oh, no, we can't compete at this level. The Red Sox are going to blow us out of the water. He was not exactly telling the truth. Cleveland was right there. Didn't get Manny, but they were there. And that kind of comment by Mr. Hart, I have a long relationship with him. We have a good relationship. That's typical winter meetings subterfuge. So that was the 2000 winter meetings. Again, one of the great spending sprees in the game's history, at least relative to the times that were taking place. The next one, 2007. Now, this was one of my favorite stories that I've broken. This was the age before Twitter. So there's none of this social media stuff going on. To break a story, you had to get it on your website, and then obviously you had to have people see it. I was working for foxsports.com at the time, and I got wind of a possible trade between the Tigers and Marlins. Yes, it was the Miguel Cabrera trade. And I got all the names, actually, pretty much. The trade turned out to be Miguel Cabrera and Dontrell Willis to the Tigers for Andrew Miller, Cameron Maybin, and 4 prospects. At the time, Andrew Miller and Cameron Maybin were prospects, and really big-time prospects. The Tigers were getting, of course, Miguel Cabrera, who was one of the great stars of the game, and Dontrell was still Dontrell back then. So this was a monstrous trade, and it was very exciting to get that one out there. And I remember this vividly. The Detroit writers were in the media room, and they were kind of just relaxing, kidding around with each other. It was JP Morosi, my later colleague at foxsports.com, Danny Nobler, who now runs a bar in Thailand. Great guy, great reporter. And I believe Tom Gage from the Detroit News. I'm not exactly sure if my memory is correct there, but those guys were messing around, just not doing anything bad. They were just kind of having fun. And I was thinking, as we were waiting for the story to publish, oh man, wait till these guys see this. That was a pretty good one. That was a big trade, kind of classic winter meetings trade that, well, we don't see much of anymore. Then 2012. Now, this is a great story. By this point, John Morosi and I were working together at foxsports.com, and we caught wind of a potential 3-way trade between the Diamondbacks, the Rangers, and the Rays. The way it worked, the Rangers wanted Justin Upton, the Diamondbacks wanted James Shields, and Tampa Bay, as always back then, wanted prospects. Now, this trade never came to fruition, but the stories from the negotiations are legendary. Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News wrote about this at one point a few years back. So that night, it was basically an all-nighter. Those 3 teams were all together in one of the suites, and we knew this. John and I knew this. So at about, 1 in the morning, I went to sleep, and John stayed up until maybe 6 a.m. When I came back out, I was going to do Hot Stove for MLB Network, and I was ready again at that point to report and do my job. So, all right, it's an all-nighter. That's one thing. But what happened in the suite is really what makes this legendary. Kirk Gibson, who was then the Diamondbacks manager, headbutted and put in a chokehold John Daniels, who was then the Rangers general manager, president of baseball operations. I'm not sure what the title was then. These guys had been perhaps drinking a little, and they kind of got into it. Now, nobody got hurt. It was more fun than anything. I think Gibson was trying to possibly intimidate John Daniels a little bit. Andrew Friedman was involved. Kevin Towers, the great general manager, Diamondbacks, Padres. They were all just having a wild time. Now, this all came out later. But what I remember most about that was I get to the lobby, it was 7:30 a.m., something along those lines, because, again, getting ready for Hot Stove. And Kevin Towers, who I knew had been up all night, I knew it. He comes strolling through the lobby looking like he had slept 12 hours. KT, as we called him, was an absolute legend, and he could do that. He could drink, he could stay up all night, and he could make trades, and he'd come out the next morning as if nothing ever happened. He was one of my all-time favorite people. He's a guy who made the winter meetings great, and we miss him so dearly. But that story, the raucous frolicking that was going on in that suite as these guys were trying to negotiate a trade that never happened, that's one of my all-time favorite winter meeting stories. All right, here we go with the dude and dork of the week. Dude of the week, he's 19 years old. He has yet to play a single game in the major leagues, and he is about to sign a contract for $82 million. I'm talking, of course, about Jackson Chourio. And people can debate the wisdom of this deal from the Brewers' perspective, taking a gamble on a kid who's never played in the majors. From Chourio's perspective, I wrote about this on Sunday, how obviously by waiting, he could have gotten the numbers up even higher if he had just established himself as a major leaguer. If he had gone year to year, the numbers could have been even higher. Juan Soto's done pretty well in arbitration as a Super 2 player. $80 million plus in arbitration is what he's going to end up with. That's before becoming a free agent entering his age 26 season. Chourio, though, wanted the security. He wanted the assurance of the money, and you cannot blame any player, in my opinion, for this. I always think of, if it was my son, what would I say? And I know that, yes, there's not that much risk in waiting on going year to year, but when they throw that kind of guarantee at you, when you grew up in Maracaibo, Venezuela, probably dreaming of playing in the major leagues, one, and making a great living for your family, two, that's a hard thing to turn down. So Jackson Chourio, we look forward to seeing you play. Congratulations on the contract, and you are our dude of the week. Dork of the week, I was actually going to have some fun with some of my colleagues this week, two in particular, the Wall Street Journal's Lindsay Adler and Sports Illustrated's Stephanie Apstein. They both pursued stories regarding Ohtani's dog this week. Now, they wrote bigger stories about Ohtani, but both were trying to find out the name of his dog, and they both failed. I was going to name them Dorks of the Week, but kind of in a friendly way. But no, on Sunday morning, I learned that the Angels had gotten under the luxury tax threshold, something they had desperately tried to do by putting half the team on waivers on August 31st. Well, it turns out that they did get under the luxury tax threshold. So you might think, well, who's the Dork of the Week then? Why would you venture into this territory with the Angels? Artie Moreno is the Dork of the Week. And yes, congratulations to Artie for getting under the luxury tax threshold. It's going to give them a better draft pick should they lose Ohtani, which we all expect that they will. They'll get a pick after the second round because they don't exceed the luxury tax, as opposed to a pick after the fourth. But the reason Artie Moreno is Dork of the Week because of all the shenanigans that took place to get the Angels to this point. They loaded up at the deadline. Seemingly were going to go well over the luxury tax. And then they dumped all those guys. 5 of them, it turned out. 5 players lost on waivers on August 31st for giving their fans whiplash. And for what? They traded 2 prospects, debate how good they are, for Lucas Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez. They waived them a month later. Congratulations, you got under the luxury tax threshold. That's fantastic for the Angels, I guess. But Artie Moreno, the way you've run your team, you're a repeat winner of this award. And if things don't get better in Anaheim some point soon, I trust that you're going to win this award again. Time now for Grillin Ken. Let's get to your questions. The first one comes from Extend Jansen already. I'm not sure if he's talking about Danny Jansen or Kenley Jansen, but it may be Danny because the tagline is at Blue Jay Scouting. That's the ID of the Twitter account. The question is, what are the Dodgers doing at the shortstop position for next year? As of right now, it's Gavin Lux. Gavin Lux, of course, coming off the surgery. He missed all of last year after blowing out his knee. He could be the shortstop, but there are still people who believe that they're not ideally positioned if they're going to play Lux at short and Max Muncy at third. That defensively, that could be a problem. So it's possible that the Dodgers will upgrade at shortstop. Obviously, their priority is finding starting pitching right now. They're in on Ohtani, as we all know. But could they get to shortstop eventually? Yes. It would enable them to play Lux at second, keep Mookie in the outfield. They wouldn't have to get another outfielder. There are a number of ways they can go, but I am not sure. Actually, I'm not certain at all that they're wedded to Gavin Lux at short. All right, on to the next question. It comes from Hillel Armbarn Creef. He asks, why does it seem like the Padres are going to get a solid return for Soto? He's basically in the same spot as Betts was before he was traded with 1 year left. With one caveat, he's not going to sign an extension. The Red Sox got next to nothing back. Why is this different? Excellent questions, Hillel. And let's go back to the Betts trade for a second. Remember, it wasn't just Mookie Betts that went to the Dodgers. It was David Price, along with half of the money that was owed Price, It was $48 million out of the $96 million he was owed at the time. So because the Dodgers were taking on all that money with Price, that depressed the return that went back to Boston. Remember, it was Alex Verdugo, Jeter Downs, and Connor Wong, who has become a decent catcher for them. And Verdugo's been an okay player, no question about that. But man, it was Mookie Betts. We all know it wasn't a great trade for the Red Sox. So how does Soto compare? Well, it could actually compare if indeed the Padres attached Trent Grisham to the deal along with Soto. Now, Grisham's not making nearly what Price was, but the more money that the team acquiring Soto is taking on, remember, it's $30 million plus with Soto, then plus Grisham, if that's the way it turns out, the less the return is going to be. And you're right. Without the possibility of an extension, it makes it even more difficult for the team acquiring Soto to give up a ton. Now, with Betts, there was the possibility of an extension, but most people thought at the time he was going to go become a free agent. The pandemic kind of changed things. I think maybe Mookie got a little antsy, and of course he got a great deal, so why not sign it? But the question that you ask, how can the Padres get a strong return for Soto, is a good one. They're not getting all the Yankees prospects, all the Blue Jays prospects. They're going to get probably some quality people in return, but because of the circumstances, it's not going to be nearly what they gave up in the deal with the Nationals. The next question comes from the photographer who asks, what's your favorite food you look forward to while traveling for MLB? This is a good question. I had to think about it a little bit, but deep dish pizza in Chicago is one of my favorite things in the world. Now, it's not something I can eat multiple times when I'm in Chicago. I'll eat it once and then probably not eat a whole lot the next day. But I'm a fan of deep dish pizza. Obviously, the food in a lot of cities is great. San Francisco in particular, New York. I can go on, but let's go with deep dish pizza. Winter meetings this week. When there is news, Foul Territory will be all over it, and I'll be joining them from time to time as well. I want to thank everyone for listening, for watching. You know where to find us: YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Like us, subscribe to us. We will be talking to you again at the conclusion of the meetings next week.
Hey, get in on the action with the FT fam at BetMGM. New customers use the bonus code FOUL, F-O-U-L, for a $1,500 first bet offer. Download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android, or visit BetMGM.com. Sign up and deposit at least $10 into your BetMGM Sportsbook account. Place your first wager and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. If that bet does lose, your bonus bets will be available once your initial wager is settled. Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.